Well, that was not what the Cleveland Browns had in mind. Pretty tough day for Cleveland as they fall to 1-2 on the season, dropping a game to the New York Giants that everybody had circled on their schedule as a game that the Browns should win. Final score today, 21-15. A couple good moments along the way, but largely some pretty frustrating football here on the shores of Lake Erie. We'll get into it next. Our post-game instant analysis show coming up from Cleveland Browns Stadium. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Cleveland Browns Stadium. Cleveland Browns on SI. You can find us si.com/NFL/Browns, and certainly on our YouTube channel and lots of our social media outlets as well. Brendan Gulick, Spencer German, both with you live on site. Anthony Moeglin from home today. And guys, this was a game that probably started as exciting as any Browns game has started in a little while. The first one, I guess, that comes to mind is maybe the playoff win in Pittsburgh. You force a fumble on the kickoff, and then bang, unbelievable throw. Maybe the best throw Deshaun's ever made as a Brown. Amari Cooper catches a touchdown, maybe erases all of the chatter around Cooper not being good enough of late. And then I don't know what happened, but the rest of the game was about as bad as it could have been, and it was it did not get much better.
I forgot that was a part of today. That was
felt like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that felt like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, I saw a stat that was shared after that first score that this was the fastest the Browns have ever scored, or not ever scored, but scored in a game since like 1970 or something like that. It was something ridiculous. And so you get off to that hot start. I mean, you could feel like the stadium was electric. People were on their feet. They were feeling good. And then they follow it up with what looked like a pretty quick, interception by the defense. And it's negated by Greg Newsome roughing the passer. You can debate if it's a bad call. I think at this point, though, you kind of just have to accept like some of these calls are going to be bad, and it's just kind of the nature of the NFL and what we're stuck with. And I think from that point on, the momentum just swung heavily in the Giants' favor. They kind of got a second chance at life here to dig themselves out of an early, momentum swing that went against them, and they found a way to do it, and they seized the moment, and then they just were red hot the rest of that first half.
It was really amazing how those two that one play really changed the game, right? Because we'll argue about it, but you end up getting beat pretty badly the rest of the way. But you get that interception coming off of that first initial turnover, and that stadium was rocking, like you said, and it's like everything's going the Browns' way. And then for them to just continue, and credit to the Giants, I mean, right away they just went 80 yards down the field, not punched it in for a touchdown, and it felt weird. Right from the start, right after that little section right there, felt really weird the rest of the way, and it obviously proved out.
Well, listen, I don't have the stats in front of me, but if I remember correctly, those first two scoring drives for the Giants were something like 13 plays and 89 yards, and it took almost 8 minutes off the first quarter clock. The second scoring drive was like 11 plays and something like 69 or 70 yards, took another almost 7 minutes off the clock. So they bled a lot of that first half, and the discrepancy in number of plays run at halftime was basically 2-1. And so in some regard, you're really frustrated. The game's not going well, but it's still within reach. And, look, it's the NFL. There are very rarely games that are so lopsided you never have a chance. And the Browns had a chance late. But way too many times throughout the course of this game, I thought they were self-inflicted wounds. And listen, there were certainly wounds that were not self-inflicted, right? You don't shoot yourself in the foot by having guys not available. The offensive line was a huge problem. Deshaun didn't play great. I don't think pinning all of the problem here on Deshaun Watson is appropriate, but he didn't play that well. At one point when you have an offensive line where you have to bring Nick Harris off the bench to play center, you move Posick to guard, you move Bitonio to tackle, and then you've got Zach Zinter playing at guard because, injuries just kind of keep piling up. I thought Jed Wills looked largely terrible in real time. I mean, I haven't watched the tape, but I don't think it looked good. I thought DeJuan Jones had a really bad game. So it's just like, all the way around, the Browns did not seem ready at all, and kind of acknowledged that post-game that there were different pressure packages from New York than they were expecting.
Which I think let me jump in here real quick because I thought that was really odd hearing that from Deshaun, and I know exactly what you're talking about, Brendan, because we were listening right along with him, and he was talking about how the Giants brought something different than what they were expecting, and they weren't expecting him to bring pressure, and they were more of a shell coverage as opposed to what they showed today. And I mean, we see it very much so from the periphery. Like, what the axis we have is definitely on the outskirts. And I knew that they were the seventh most. They generated the seventh most pressures in all of the NFL, and I knew they were going to try to bring it. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, wait a second, we didn't know this. What were we talking about all week? Like them trying to heat it up. They didn't have any chance other than trying to heat the Browns up. I don't know what the conversation was throughout the week because if I'm a Giants fan or coach or whatever, I'm thinking the only way we win today is if we get to the quarterback. So I'm going to
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was telling though that theme was echoed, even from the locker room guys. Joe Batonio talked about it, that they showed some different things than what they were expecting. I think the biggest difference, Anthony, was like first couple of weeks, it seemed like they generated a lot more pressure just from their front four guys, which makes sense because when you have Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, like those are guys that can do that for you, right? Like those are guys that are going to be able to really wreak havoc. But today it was about like some of the exotic looks, the stunts that they ran. There was a couple of times they ran delayed blitzes, and that was actually how Joe Wills got caught up in a situation. I think the first sack of the game was he kind of helped double team Lawrence and then tried to kick out on a delayed blitz, and that freed up Lawrence to then go make the play. So I clearly there was something there that they were not ready for or expecting. And you're right though. Like I talked about it coming in. I thought the two things that could really, I felt the Browns were the better team all around and had the best opportunity to win this game. Vegas felt the same. They were 6.5-point favorites. But I thought coming in, like the two things that really could screw this game up were going to be if they could generate pressure and mess with this offensive line with that front group, and if Malik Neighbors just took over. And those are literally the two things that I think played out the most prominent in this game.
For me, it wasn't even so much the pressure, it was the way they pressured that kept Deshaun in a chaotic pocket. Because to me, his best trait right now is extending plays. He's obviously athletic, and you saw it a couple of times today. But by making him panic with not usually somewhere to go, I thought was really the downfall. And I don't remember if it was 7 or 8 sacks. And
it was 8. It was 8.
Who the heck knows how many more hurries? Or
17 hits, I think, total on him, which is very reminiscent of Week 1, where he had 7. He was hit 17 times as well.
That is completely unacceptable, and the Browns know it. Look, I think some of this, in my opinion, some of it belongs on the coaching staff. Why was there like never a commitment, like a hard commitment to the run game today? Why did we see such little like jumbo packages? And I'm not talking about running like goal line caliber plays from the 40-yard line, but I don't recall seeing in real action, the amount of like 2 tight end looks that I would have probably liked to see if you can't protect the quarterback. Or do they have that little faith in the run game coming into the day? I mean, it's, you don't know what's said behind the scenes. All I know is that like the scheme today, the lack of adjustments all the way around, just not even close to being good enough. And the final score shows a 6-point loss, but anybody that watched that game doesn't feel like this was a 6-point defeat. I mean, this one's pretty deflating.
Well, and I'll say this to the run game point too, because last week we saw them utilize the run game, and we saw them utilize those sort of jumbo packages. Zach Zinter was coming out as kind of an eligible wide receiver type player off the line as a tight end, and they were using those to their advantage. And that's what's perplexing about it, I think, Brendan, is like you saw the success you could have run the football last week. You knew coming in, like the biggest weakness on this defense was that they weren't a very good run-stopping team, and then there was just not really a commitment to it. And maybe there just wasn't the lanes to run that they expected. But I mean, from my estimation, like even though they got dominated in the first half, the fact that, to your point, like they score that touchdown with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and you look up and you're like, oh shoot, like this is a 1-possession game all of a sudden. Like that tells me that there was still room for you to utilize that. You weren't completely out of the game, that you just had to abandon it and never come back to it. So I'm with you. Like that was pretty perplexing today. That wasn't a bigger part of the game plan.
And you got an absolute gift. Like you started the game up 7-0 after kicking the ball off 10 seconds into it. If you even at the very least just squeeze the life out of the game, you come out with a win. Like I totally agree. Like we're going to point the finger a lot on the guys who had the football in their hands or were blocking for, on the offensive line. But a lot of questions got to be asked of the coaching staff,
Well, I mean, Anthony, you probably see it better than we do because you played quarterback. But the idea that, like, there were times where if you're at home watching the game or you're in the stadium and you might be thinking, he's open. Why is Deshaun not seeing him? Like, I thought there were a bunch of plays where as he's going through his progressions, he's the plays that were called weren't even close to being, efficient or effective because the guys that are open are third, fourth options in
Yes.
those reads.
Yes, ones and twos were not getting open. And again,
And when the pocket collapses like that, what are you
in
going to
the
do?
pockets like that, right? When your one's not open, you flip to two and you're getting hit in the face.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We could have Tom Brady playing, and it wouldn't have mattered today because it just was so disappointing. It's just a very disappointing performance that they put out today on offense in a game that, truthfully, it wasn't. Nobody talked about it as one of those games that were a must win. This was, like, in my opinion, a must win. This schedule is not going to get any easier throughout the rest of the, even next week. You're going to go to Las Vegas and face a pass rush that's, guarantee you, a little bit more intimidating than what we saw today. And it's just, this was a game you couldn't scratch in the L column, and you did. And this is a very big missed opportunity.
Well, and I think that's kind of the scary thing too, Anthony, is like now the blueprint's out there. Like the Giants showed everybody, if you mix and match your blitzes and, show some things, fake some things, bring pressure, don't bring pressure, you're going to confuse these guys, whether it's the, maybe the two younger guys that kind of bookend the offensive line and Jedrick Wills and DeJuan Jones. Maybe with Jack Conklin, things are a little bit better if he's able to play, but we don't know what the serious severity of this hamstring issue is. But like now teams know they can do this, and you're going on a tough stretch. We got 3 games on the road. Like if this wasn't a must win, like the next couple of games feel like must wins because to your point, like, and I've said this all week too, like the schedule is not necessarily advantageous to you. Listen, I know good teams win in December anyway, so you got to just kind of play who's in front of you and find ways to win. But when you got teams like the Chiefs, the Dolphins potentially with Tua back, a bunch of division games late in the year. You got to go to Denver, which always seems like that's like a house of horrors for the Browns. Like there's some tough matchups that they're going to have to navigate. And if you don't stack some wins now, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball to try to be in the playoff picture come that time of year.
And suddenly you think about next week in a different context with what we saw today. I mean, I think a lot of Browns fans came into this game going, listen, bad week 1, bad.
Yeah.
Last week wasn't great, substantially better, got to win on the road.
They made progress.
Hey, a win on the road because that's great. Last year was so hard to pick up wins away from home. Now you got the Giants, the Raiders, the Commanders, and like in your head, you automatically think, all right, 4-1 is like really, really possible.
Yeah.
Before you're going to play an Eagles team that maybe doesn't look as good as everybody thought, but that's certainly an upper half of the NFL caliber team. So yeah, this, you kind of ride the roller coaster of the year a little bit, and it's sitting in your mind that all of a sudden now the games that you thought looked like, pretty easily winnable games maybe aren't so straightforward. And look, the coaches and this team have got to figure it out. I'd like to think they're capable of doing that. But it is fair to say that, like, on paper, this Browns team is way more talented than the Giants. And good teams don't stumble in games like this. And, you can get past it and still make a run. You're 1-2. That doesn't mean the season's over. The playoffs are still a realistic opportunity. But there's got to be a real sense of urgency because this was just as flat as it comes.
Yeah, and I think it's concerning that now 2 of the 3 weeks you've played, you've seen a lot of the same issues. Mostly up front with the offensive line, maybe a little bit with Deshaun processing things, and if he's not able to extend plays like he tends to do, that obviously becomes a problem as well. But I mean, even today, like it's funny. Like I thought the sort of carousel of tackles and offensive linemen that they had today because of injuries. We saw Jet Wills leave with a knee injury. Wyatt Teller left with a knee injury that he was ruled out pretty quickly. So maybe a little more serious there. That's obviously a little bit daunting here. And then James Hudson goes down. And so you end up with this offensive line that has Joel Bitonio, Ethan Posick playing left guard, and then Nick Harris at center and the rookie Zach Zinter at right guard. Like, I thought that sort of was a microcosm of what felt kind of like a circus-like game in general that was played today because it was like very up and down.
The only 5 healthy offensive linemen they had at that point. They didn't have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, that was what they had to do. But like, there was moments where it was like somehow they're still in this game. They get the quick touchdown, then it goes completely against them. There's like this avalanche of just momentum for the Giants. They still managed to keep it close. And then at the end of the game, like even Stefanski, I thought short-circuited a little bit. Now, I know people might have questions about him going for 2 where he did, but the analytical data says that was a smart move. And we kind of talked it out, Brendan, upstairs. Like, if you get the 2 there, you set yourself up where you don't have to chase a touchdown necessarily. You can kick 2 field goals with 11 minutes to go. That's still manageable potentially, and you feel good about that to potentially tie the game. So I didn't have a problem with that. But that 4th down call and late in the game, in my opinion, very, very questionable. And you had 3 timeouts. You still had the 2-minute warning. Your defense, yeah, they played poorly in the second half. So
No.
I don't know that you can use the excuse that you just didn't trust them, because the second half, they kept the Giants off the scoreboard entirely. So I just didn't think that was the right move there. And I'm not one to necessarily critique Stefanski too much. I think he's done a phenomenal job here, and he's a great play caller, great offensive mind, all those different things. But today was a day where I think even he had some struggles in certain spots where he had to make some key decisions, and I think it backfired on his team.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is just that, like, they had a chance at the end after all of that madness at the end. You had yourself a chance, and then you're gonna forget. I forgot about it after the game. They fumbled the ball on the 50-yard line on a handoff, right? Like, that's just stuff that's
and Deshaun didn't really want to. Well, I get what he was trying to do. He didn't want to blame like Jerome Ford, but he was very much like, yeah, just didn't hand it off, like didn't make the connection. It was like, well, clearly there was something that wasn't set up right, because you do that a million times at practice, and how does it not work?
It wasn't even like a crazy play. He just stuck it in his belly, and the ball just hit the ground. And it's like, at that point, you're at the 50-yard line, and you were rolling a little bit, and like you're starting to build some momentum. And at that point, you're like, hey, let's go win this thing. And then you still, even after that, had another chance to do it. It's just overall just kept being a just total disappointment.
So the only other thing that I actively thought about from the offensive side a few times during the game, I wonder how much this team really misses Bill Callahan, because the offensive line in general this year has not. It's been a combination of not healthy and not cohesive, and for whatever reason, it's not gelling the right way. And I'd like to think we appreciated it enough when he was here, but boy, what I wouldn't give to have him back right now.
I think it's a fair question.
Go ahead, Spence.
No, I was going to say, I think that's a fair question, and as long as they play poorly, it's going to keep, like, it's not going to go away either. And it's funny because Anthony and I talked pregame, Brendan, about giving some grace to Jedrick Wills coming off of a knee injury, his first game since November. Like, there's going to be some growing pains. But when he's not like even picking stuff up correctly, that's concerning. And that's where you wonder, like, the magic of Bill Callahan. But the other thing is, like, I kind of wondered if Bill Callahan just wasn't the right coach for him, maybe because maybe he's like too harsh. We hear what Wyatt Teller had to say about working with Bill Callahan. But maybe he wants more of that like TLC type relationship that Andy Dickerson seems to bring to the table. But I mean, with how he played today, like, there's nowhere else to point and be like, oh, it's this, it's that, whatever. Even understanding it was his first game back since November, he just looks like sometimes he's a little lost out there and maybe doesn't love the game, which are the same things we've talked about with him for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say it's not just on Jed Wills. He was horrible today, but you flip across the other side and
DeJuan was bad too.
DeJuan was bad. DeJuan he's been a good portion of this offensive line for a year now. He was bad today. He was just flat out bad. Kayvon Thibodeau was having his absolute way with DeJuan, and it was, I mean, it's just a swinging gate, and it's just everything you think about. Just like, dang it, you lose this game by 6 points, and you just had chance after chance after chance after chance to get it done.
And so that kind of goes to telling you, like, the margin of winning and losing in this league is pretty small, because as we flip it to the defensive side, probably played well enough to win. Wasn't a great effort, but obviously caused a couple of takeaways and some big moments. Had one that was negated by a penalty, and that kind of sucked the air out of this place a little bit. And you look at somebody like Myles Garrett, who is, I don't know, is he playing on one leg? Is he playing on no legs? Is he playing on no feet? Like, he's clearly not healthy. And watching him walk and being, address the media and then be carted out afterward, the guy's given it everything he's got. And I thought Grant Delpit played a pretty good game today. Largely, I thought Newsome played pretty well. JOK stood out to me a little bit. I thought Denzel played all right. I guess I didn't think, incredibly highly of his game today. It's hard not to think about Malik Neighbors and the way he was borderline unstoppable. I mean, that kid played out of his mind and maybe had his like NFL coming out party. I mean, I know he's played a couple of
I
good
think
games leading up to this, but that was
I,
really impressive.
and Anthony, I'm curious your thoughts on it too, but I felt like the neighbor stuff was very scheme related because we know that the Browns are going to give up some plays like to guys because they play so much man. Like they're going to do crossing routes and guys are going to get left behind, and they did a lot of that with neighbors. And then some of the stuff like they were just getting one-on-one situations and throwing it up to him, and he was making plays. And what are you going to do? I mean, he flat out stole an
That's the play.
interception out of
That
MJ
was
Emerson's hands, which was just like
unreal.
that was like Jim Schwartz called him Odell Beckham Jr. 2.0 or whatever earlier this week. Like that was a very Odell Beckham Jr. in his prime type play. So yeah, like I maybe I don't know if you agree with that, Anthony, but it felt like it was very scheme related, like where they made a point in getting him open and making it easy for Daniel Jones to find him.
Yeah, make it really easy. When the Browns are going to major in man-to-man coverage, you just get a guy who finds an advantage somewhere. I wouldn't have said that going against Martin Emerson is a win for a receiver, but today it was. I mean, he straight up had his number in the first half, and that was the play, Spence. I mean, that was when he did that. That's when everyone flipped from, oh, we're going to be fine to, oh, the Browns are in trouble, because that was he stole it. He saved the possession, and not only that, set them up with first and goal or first and something from the inside the 20-yard line, which he then cashed in with a nice little double move, and he played fantastic. But Brennan, to your point, in the second half, the Giants' drives were this: 3 plays and a fumble, 4 plays and a punt, 6 plays and a punt, 3 plays and a punt, 4 plays and a punt, 5 plays and a punt, 4 plays missed field goal, 4 plays end the game.
Yeah, I mean they didn't do anything.
Good job. You did your job.
Yeah.
Well, and Brendan, you brought up just the offense, really clicking for the Giants early on. We didn't even mention the fact that Daniel Jones on I think it was the Giants' second possession, because they went 3 and out in the first series. And the second possession, he had his first incompletion of the game, and he went from that point on, he completed his next 16 of 17 passes, and the only one that was incomplete was a throw to the end zone where his tight end was wide open, and he overthrew him a little bit, probably still should have caught it, and it was a drop. And then the very next play, he found Neighbor, or I think it was 2 plays later, he found Neighbors for a touchdown on a ball that was also pretty high. But like this quarterback that we talked all week about, like, the jury's still out on Daniel Jones. He's a great runner, and that was the big thing that the Browns talked about too. He was doing it in the passing game today too, and I think that's also alarming, because it's like
he looked like an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, he looked good. Like he did not look like the Daniel Jones that we were all laughing at throwing a bunch of pick sixes in the preseason.
Yeah, it was frustrating. I mean, I totally agree with you. I came into this game expecting that the Browns defense would look like what we know the Browns defense to be, and that Daniel Jones would struggle. And the second half, I mean, those numbers you give, Anthony, that's exactly what it was. Like they kept you in the game, and you had chances. And offensively, just not good enough. Scheme was bad. Offensive line play was terrible. Watson wasn't good enough. They couldn't run the ball. I don't know that they really even made a great effort to try to run the ball today. So yeah, I mean, it's back to the drawing board and got to figure it out quickly, because Vegas is coming, and the reality is you also got to get healthy, and I don't know what they got to do this week to get healthy on the offensive line. It sounds like Jack Conklin suffered what Kevin Stefanski would call a minor setback. He said he didn't think it would be several weeks, but I don't know that. Based on the answer he gave post-game today, I don't think to myself, hey, Conklin's coming back next week.
Yeah, I wasn't all that confident in like, oh yeah, he's going to suit up next week. They're talking about, oh, he won't miss multiple weeks. Like, great.
Well, anytime I hear Stefanski talk about injuries, I just think back to last year when they called Deshaun Watson day-to-day for like 4 straight weeks while he was injured. So
aren't we all day-to-day? Everybody's day-to-day.
I mean, that is a good way to put it. I think Kevin Stefanski's used that line before, actually. And I'll say this too, Brendan, real quick on the injury front. The offensive line played bad today, and that might be the thing that people are looking at like this is a major concern moving forward. I honestly think the biggest concern moving forward is what you mentioned. Myles Garrett having to be like carted out of here after the game. Like you mentioned, he's fighting through it. But the problem is he's fighting through it in week 3. Like we have 14 more games to go. I'm already ahead to an 18-game season at some point here in the future. But there's 14 more of these things to go, and he's already dealing with this injury to this severity and missing series and different things. Like that's going to be a problem for this team if he can't consistently be out there on the field.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I am focused a little bit more on a different area coming out of this. Deshaun, figure it out. $230 million. to be the guy on a team that when everybody else is struggling, you are the guy that is supposed to be able to lift everybody else up. And I'm sure that deep down inside, he probably knows that. And he doesn't leave the stadium today feeling great about his performance. I'm not trying to call him out. It's more just a, hey man, you're the guy in the locker room,
Yeah.
and you are the guy this franchise is building itself around. Every good thing, you need to make sure you give everybody credit, and every bad thing that happens, you got to take it really personally and fix it and put it on your shoulders and figure out a way to make it happen. I don't know that there's a world that exists where he gets benched. I know there's fans in the stadium at times chanting for Jameis Winston. You got a $230 million quarterback on the field, guys. Unless he's injured, I think he's staying in the game. So just you got to figure it out. Some way, somehow, even the things that aren't his fault, even if it comes across as unfair, you're the star. You got to figure it out. And
You can't get out.
Town and this team is counting on it.
And you can't get outplayed by Daniel Jones. Like, you just can't. Like, and it's not to be disrespectful, but you can't get outplayed by Daniel Jones, and it was outplayed, and that's putting it nicely. Daniel Jones looked good today. Deshaun, while his stats are going to be good, and they are good, and he put up a nice day, he didn't play good when he needed it. You need to be, if you're going to get paid all that money when it's crunch time and the game's on the line, you're down 6 after all the BS that was the start of the game. You have a chance to win the football game. Go do it, and we didn't get it done.
Well, and I think that continues to be just at the heart of the Deshaun conversation in general, is just this idea that, like, what is the expectation for him? And I've been, on other platforms, obviously, where I get a chance to talk about this team. Like, I've been sort of harsh on Browns fans because I think a lot of them have lowered the expectation where they're like, well, hey, if they're just winning games and he's a game manager, like, that's all we need. But, like, no, like, you didn't trade 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson to just be okay. And he kind of talked this week about the changes in, the too high coverage and how that's really, like, prevented teams from being able to do certain things. And that's all fine. But at least in those crunch time moments, you got to get the handoff to Jerome Ford. You got to make the plays to win you games. And last week he was maybe robbed of that a little bit with the penalties. So it's hard to put it all on him when the offensive line was so bad today. But I'm with you guys where it's like, at some point, you got to at least see a guy that in those spots and in a tight game, he can lead his team to victory, and we have yet to see that, obviously, since he's been with the Cleveland Browns.
Spence, you said it without saying it. This team, this franchise mortgaged their future on him being a star. You don't trade everything that they did for a guy that can go manage the game. You went out and bought a dynamite, slam dunk, this guy's a top 5 quarterback in the league and we can win the Super Bowl with him star, because you can't waste Nick Chubb's prime or Myles Garrett's prime or now Amari Cooper's prime. You have to go out and you got to win now. And they went and got a guy that they felt like they could do that with. He's had a few flashes, and I'm not saying he played terrible today. He played okay, but okay's not good enough. You've got to elevate this team when everybody else is struggling around you. And I hope they can figure that out, because 1 and 2 certainly not what you wanted, but it's also not the end of the world, and there's time to get it right.
And it's also the reality too. It's like, all right, we can hum and haw, and we're going to. That's what we do here, and that's what fans are going to do. But for the Browns, and Spence, we talked about it last week, they turned the page pretty quickly, both after they lost to the Cowboys and after they beat the Jaguars. And that's the name of the game in the NFL, and that's the name of the game in football. Hey, we're gonna watch the tape tomorrow, and then once that's done, it's done, and it's on to Las Vegas. Because tell you what, you come back to Cleveland 1-3. I thought it was gonna be bad coming back 0-2. You come back 1-3, coming back from Las Vegas. That stadium that you guys are in is not gonna feel all that welcoming.
No.
If that's the case.
Yeah, no, and I think that's well said, Anthony. Like, maybe the encouraging thing for Browns fans after this one is how they responded after week 1. They proved that, listen, they can have that short memory. They can move forward. They can forget about it and focus on the next game. They got to do that again this week, because it was another really brutally ugly game out there in week 3, and go out on the road and try to get another win. Maybe another encouraging thing is the fact that Amari Cooper had a good game today, and that was kind of lost in translation because so many things went well. So there are some positive signs moving forward. They were outweighed probably by the negative stuff today, but hopefully, like you said, Anthony, they can just clear the slate, move on to the next one. They proved they can do that once before. That's kind of the theme of the season moving forward now.
All right, final score today: New York Giants 21, Cleveland Browns 15. Lots more to talk about over on si.com/NFL/Browns. Also, please join our conversation with film breakdowns and lots more to come this week, both recapping this game and looking ahead on our YouTube channel and our social media channels. For Spencer German and Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. We will see you soon. Browns fall to 1-2. Final score today, the Giants 21, Browns 15.